Tim, how you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Doing well and great to see you again. Thank you so much for joining us for Imagine Talks. And I'm especially excited to talk to you because of where we've been in 2020 and also essentially where you work, the crossroads intersection of technology and politics, and also the fact that you've overcome two major hurdles within that area to make that achievement, being Asian and young, which are two things that you've also was able to like fight uphill battle. So before I jump into some of my really nitty gritty questions, could you share a little bit about yourself with the audience and tell us a bit about how you got started and basically the premise of FiscalNote and how that became one of the creation you're working on right now?
Yeah, well, happy to give a little bit of background on myself and certainly my family and whatnot. So my family, my parents actually immigrated to the United States, in the 80s from South Korea, and my father was a physicist, my mother was a small business owner, and really instilled in me kind of the traditional values of being Asian American and obviously working hard and the end of that rainbow being obviously a stable career and a stable job and the like. Definitely basically threw that all out the window. When I was in middle school and high school, I got kind of swept up in the world of politics. First started interning with my local congressman, was at the district attorney's office. And then my dream was to become actually a prosecutor, in the United States, and then kind of, work pretty closely in that regard. But I think that, I kind of really got swept up into that kind of electoral politics. And so in 2007, ended up joining a presidential campaign, back then was for Senator Obama, who was running for, the White House. And lo and behold, obviously that campaign ended up turning pretty well. And so about a year later, when I was at the age of 17, decided that I was going to do something really crazy and run for office. So I ran for the Board of Education in Montgomery County, Maryland, which is the largest district in the state of Maryland. It's about a quarter of the state's population. Got elected, served there, managing roughly, call it, 22,000 teachers, $2.5 billion taxpayer budget, another $4 billion kind of capital improvement budget and the like. And really got a rough and tumble into kind of the world of politics from a very early age. Obviously, it wasn't super, aligned with what my parents were thinking, and they were really pushing me hard to go back to school. And so ended up going to Princeton to study public policy and computer science, and then was starting over at Harvard to start my MBA, but decided that I really wanted to go off and do something new. And while I was an undergrad, really got kind of linked up into the startup world, kind of the technology and startup world. And, a lot of my friends were kind of, going out to Silicon Valley or starting companies or really thinking about kind of how to leverage technology in a new and novel way. And so, I think that, by the end of my undergraduate career, I realized that I really wanted to start a company, but I wasn't really sure kind of what the product was going to be, what service we were going to launch. And I just fundamentally thought about what I was interested in. And I was obviously interested in politics. I was interested in law. I was interested in policy. And one of the biggest challenges that I'd seen when I was sitting in government or, working around politics was just how inefficient things were and how much time people spent trying to track what other people are doing, right? So if you were in Congress, you spend a lot of time thinking about what the federal regulatory agencies are doing, what foreign governments are doing. If you are a regulator, you think a lot about, what state governments are doing, what city governments are doing. And so I felt like there's a very big opportunity to aggregate all of the actions of government. So the legislation, the regulations, the court cases, all the things that were kind of happening, left and right. And then to be able to take that information and then build a software product that helps organizations basically monitor how laws and regulations are impacting their industries or their customers or their constituents. And so we moved out to Silicon Valley, bootstrapped a couple $1,000s, something like $6,000 or something like that between summer savings. And really just started the company, out of a Motel 6 room in 2013. We were coding, calling customers, pitching investors, and in 2014 we launched our product, and just aggressively grew the business from there. And so, the company, we moved our headquarters out from Silicon Valley to Washington, D.C. I would say end of 2013, kind of early 2014, and are now actually the largest technology company headquartered in the District of Columbia. We now service about 5,000 customers. Our customers range from DoD, State Department, CIA, White House, every member of the House and the Senate, half of the Fortune 100, major investment banks and financial institutions and law firms. Where we've kind of been able to build a fairly large B2B customer base to kind of help us continue to grow the business. We've raised probably about 400 million or so in venture capital. And so, investors include folks like, Mark Cuban, Jerry Yang, Steve Case, NEA, the Economist Group, S&P Global, and so on and so forth. And so, really, we've been able to kind of continue to grow our business, not just here domestically, but also internationally. We have offices across Europe and Asia, also across North America as well, where we're kind of continue to expand our presence as well. So it's definitely been a really interesting experience, but our mission as a company really hasn't changed that much from when we started the company 7 years ago, and we're just continuing to kind of push forward on what we want to accomplish here.
So many questions, and yet I only have so little time with you. That's so awesome, and gosh, such just such vision. Like, I love how you, and so many people in Silicon Valley and startups, they don't realize the most basic core formula that you just displayed, which was you must first understand a problem before you go out and try to create a solution, right? And you did that. You really understood. And it wasn't a technology based. It was an actual problem that existed in the ecosphere, in the ecosystem, and from there you saw a technological solution from it. So that's awesome that you did that. Okay, so then this brings me to another question here. 2020, craziest year that I've ever experienced, and I think probably true for many people on planet Earth right now. And it basically had huge shifts in how many of us globally, but definitely here in the States, how we view and connect politically, and also how we shifted our use of technology as well too. Have you seen ripples of that affect FiscalNote that's basically the cross-section of politics and technology?
Yeah, I mean, so at our fundamental level at our company, we sell information to our customers, right? So we help our customers understand what governments are doing. And so, I've never seen a time where, I mean, I'm fairly young, but I've never seen a time when people were so glued to their screens on what the government was going to do. Not in 2008, not even in 2001, right? Like, really, I would say, like, it's so pervasive, like, in people's lives, shutdowns and stimulus and all these different things that, like, lockdowns that impact people at a very day-to-day level. The financial crash of 2008 was kind of that thing that's happening over on Wall Street, and, like, 9/11, people were they're definitely scared for national security, but wasn't for most people. They still went to work. They thought about what was going to happen and the like. And so I think that this is the first time when people really like at a local town, city, county, state level, were just tracking everything that the government was doing. And that put an enormous amount of pressure, certainly on our company, to be able to continue to deliver information for our customers. If you are a restaurant owner or nonprofit, seeking stimulus or tax credits, or trying to understand lockdowns and what you're capable or not capable of doing, really that critical information was, I think, very necessary. But separate and apart from that, I think the technology sector very broadly saw a lot of very, very interesting kind of trends that really accelerated over the course of the last couple of years, right? So digital transformation of enterprise is something that people talk a lot about. How for the last 40 years, people have been talking about, moving from, paper and pencil, spreadsheets to, kind of cloud-based tools and workflows and collaboration capabilities and the like, video calls and whatnot. I remember, it doesn't seem that long ago, but 18, 24 months ago, especially in more emerging markets, or different sectors, like manufacturing or oil and gas or banking, people just didn't feel comfortable doing business online, right? So they, it had to be face to face, and you had to fly there, get on a plane, and actually do business.
Sign paper.
Right, sign the physical paper, or like shake the hand, and so I think that's fundamentally changed now. I mean, people can raise billions of dollars in capital, close multi-million-dollar customer deals, and they can do it all over, Zoom or Google Hangouts. And so I think that plays significantly to technology companies like ours, who, in addition to obviously selling information, we sell a lot of workflow, so collaboration tools and chat tools and those types of things specifically for lawyers. And overall, I would say that digital transformation has accelerated quite aggressively. And the companies, I remember something that my mentor told me, because I wasn't working obviously back then, but during the .com era, a lot of corporate executives were kind of divided between, should we lean into the internet, or is the internet just kind of a fad? And ultimately what happened was, yes, there was a .com bust, but for all the executives that had the vision and the foresight to actually lean into the internet, those are the ones that actually got promoted. Those are the ones that kind of have that visionary leadership into the future, and all the ones that were kind of more antagonistic about the internet, obviously were kind of shoved aside, right? So I think that this era around enterprise cloud, machine learning, and artificial intelligence driven technologies, is only going to continue to accelerate. That's something that obviously we're continuing to watch here.
Okay, fantastic. Yeah, I was just so curious about like the impact from both political and also of technology, and that all that totally made sense. And it's amazing that in this crisis, you just showed that if you're in the right space, not only are you not like now wondering where your next dollars come from, you're actually raising amazing amounts of capital because you're now aligned with the whole global trend right now. Okay. So then the next question I have for you is, you did mention in one of the interviews that I saw of you that one of the biggest challenges you had when you were first starting this was your demographic you had to work against, right? Of being both a young person and also being an Asian American. Now, there were some not so pretty issues that were brought up about the Asian community during this year that's strongly connected to the whole viral outbreak. Do you think that has made it even tougher and harder now to be from this demographic and to start a business because of that incidence now that has happened?
I think that, to a certain extent, Asian Americans have always been viewed as outsiders, right?
Right.
They're separate. I would say separate. They have separate set of issues from kind of European immigrants, largely because of the stark contrast in appearance.
Yeah.
I guess I have a couple of thoughts on it. Number one, I don't think that COVID was. I mean, I think COVID was one of the factors, but I think that anti-Chinese sentiment is very, very strong in the United States, politically, economically, financially, culturally, philosophically, and I think for people to really understand it, they need to understand, the analogy that I would probably put forth is, how maybe Russian Americans felt during the Cold War. And I think that, Chinese Americans, many of them, in particular, Chinese Americans have been around for, many, many generations in the United States. And the challenge I think is that right now we're at a very, very heightened time, between U.S. and China in terms of political relations. We're in the middle of a pretty stark trade war. We have some very significant challenges and differences of opinion in terms of political philosophy.
Yeah.
There's a massive geopolitical tic-tac-toe game, being played across the emerging markets. And there's just at fundamentally a level of distrust. Now, COVID obviously didn't help. And obviously the political rhetoric around COVID also did not help. But, the tinderbox, was already there. And COVID was really just the match. And so it's not to say that, it's going to be difficult for Asian Americans. I think it's always been difficult for Asian Americans. But I think that in particular, in the midst of politically sensitive time periods, it's going to be very, very challenging to kind of navigate around those issues. Now, the flip side of that is that's obviously the pessimistic perspective, right? The opposite of that is that the center of global economic activity is shifting to Asia. It's shifting to China, to Japan, to Korea, Singapore, Southeast Asia. I think that most of corporate America knows, almost all of corporate America knows, that if you want to grow your business, if you're Johnson and Johnson or 3M or McDonald's or whatever it is, they know that the growth is going to come from Indonesia, from Greater China, from Korea, whatever the case is, and so their executives need to be much more aware about kind of Asian culture and sentiment. And actually, I think that Asian Americans have a very significant role to play bridging the gap between East and West in terms of helping American businesses expand into Asia, and then helping Asian businesses think about how to deal with American kind of financial markets and economic markets and the like. And so it's this kind of dual-sided coin where, on one side of the coin, there's a very antagonistic view, and the other side, you need each other to grow, particularly in a much more globally connected kind of system. And so it's a very, very interesting dynamic, but I mean, there is a role that I think that Asian Americans can play here to kind of facilitate the growth of the kind of global market and whatnot.
Okay, well, we have a few more minutes, and that automatically leads to the perfect question I want to ask in closing here then is, what can we as Asian Americans do to hopefully promote the optimistic view that you shared, where we can actually promote more connection, more partnership? I suppose obviously there's always going to be competition, but there's also no reason why part of that can't be a healthy competition and a productive partnership. What can we here stateside as Asian Americans do to help move it toward the flip side of the coin, the second scenario that you described, which I hope we can do as an entire Asian American community moving forward in 2021 onward?
So I think that there's four things, I guess, right? So I think that we need to facilitate kind of an Asian American identity. And that identity, I think, is fostered through three primary things, right? So number one is, I think we need to support Asian American entrepreneurship. Why? Because entrepreneurship is the foundational aspect of wealth creation in American society. If you want to get wealthy, you have to start a business. You have to own the business. And the fundamentals of that is, you've got to basically, start a company or be involved in starting companies, whether it's as an investor or, whatever the case is, right? That kind of fundamental kind of wealth creation should feed into the second thing, which is, I think, political representation, and creating a pipeline of political candidates that can advocate on behalf of Asian Americans, the resource that Asian Americans need, and get the representation they need in Congress and state legislatures and city houses and the like. The third thing I think is media ownership and representation. I think is obviously very important because it changes the perception of Asian Americans in mainstream society, and offers an alternative narrative, to what things that are being presented, I think, in more pessimistic corners of society. So those are the three main things I think to foster Asian American identity. And the fourth thing I would mention is, um, leaning into Asian culture. And I know that,
Hmm.
particularly for second, third, fourth, fifth generation, Asian Americans, I'm a second generation, that it's very difficult to kind of lean into that culture. It's, many second, third, fourth generations, have a hard time speaking the language or understanding the culture or the traditions and whatnot. Um, but I think that's a significant advantage into what I was talking about before, right? If you can speak the language of commerce, in the markets where, the global markets are growing very quickly. If you can speak Mandarin and, McDonald's says, we're going to have, a big investment and push into the greater China market. That's a significant advantage, for Asian Americans to be able to play in the corporate landscape, right? If you, understand and can speak Indonesian, and it's a huge priority from an investment bank to start setting up offices across Indonesia. I mean, that's you can be right at the forefront of connecting, corporate America to the rest of the world, particularly in Asia, and leaning into those cultures and customs and languages. I think is something that a lot of other cultures have done, particularly as they've tried to expand their economic imprint. And it's something that I think is a very unique opportunity for Asian Americans to present itself here.
Well, I love that. I think I'm gonna make that one of my own personal mantras, but I love it. It's really celebrating entrepreneurship, really celebrating and promoting political representation, really pushing for much more visible and positive media presentation, and celebrating and understanding and embracing and utilizing your cultural heritage. Wow.
Yeah, I think that pretty much sums it up.
No, that's all you. Uh, Tim, always such a pleasure to listen to you talk. So much wisdom. I'm so sad we came to the end of this interview because I have so many more questions. I hope I can get you for another interview sometime in 2021 or 22. So full of knowledge, so much fun and wisdom to glean from you. But um, I am going to have to say goodbye to you at this point. But thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for sharing your thoughts, your wisdom, and your advice. And I look forward to seeing you at the next Imagine Talks when we actually hopefully can meet in person.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I really appreciate you having me on here.
Likewise, you take care. Thank you again so much.
Thanks a lot.